The silver serving tray trembled in my hands as I approached the massive oak door at the end of the hallway. My throat tightened with each step across the marble floor, my footfalls muffled by the plush Persian runner. 6 months I'd worked in this mansion, yet the East Wing still felt forbidden, dangerous, like walking into the den of a predator. Remember, eyes down, speak only when spoken to, Mrs. Russo had instructed during my first week as a maid. The head housekeeper's words echoed in my mind as I balanced the breakfast tray. Careful not to spill the black coffee he demanded every morning at precisely 7:30. Mr. Castellano values punctuality above all else. I hesitated outside his bedroom door, my heart pounding against my ribs. 6 months. And I'd only glimpsed the master of the house a handful of times, usually from a distance as he strode through the mansion surrounded by men in dark suits with telltale bulges beneath their jackets. When our paths did cross, I made myself invisible, pressing against walls, lowering my gaze, becoming part of the furniture, just as we were instructed. The brass handle felt cold beneath my fingertips. I drew a deep breath, steadying the tray with one hand while knocking softly with the other. Silence. I knocked again, slightly louder. Nothing. My pulse quickened. 7:32. Mr. Castellano was never late for anything, and he expected the same precision from his staff. Mrs. Russo's warnings played on repeat in my mind. Never disturb him unnecessarily, but never, under any circumstances, let his coffee get cold. I closed my eyes, summoning courage from some hidden reservoir, and slowly turned the handle. The bedroom was dim, heavy blackout curtains drawn across floor-to-ceiling windows. Only a sliver of morning light cut through the darkness, illuminating the massive California king bed at the center of the room. The air smelled of expensive cologne, and something else, something masculine and dangerous that made my stomach tighten. And there he was, Dominic Castellano, sprawled across silk sheets, one muscular arm flung above his head, the other resting on his bare chest, rising and falling with each breath. His black hair, usually slicked back when he moved through the mansion, fell across his forehead, softening features I'd only seen hardened with intensity or narrowed in calculation. I froze in the doorway, my gaze lingering a moment too long on the tattoos decorating his shoulders and chest, intricate designs disappearing beneath the sheet draped low across his hips. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I realized I was staring at my employer, the most feared man in the city in such an intimate state. Look away, Ellie. Look away now. I cleared my throat softly. Mr. Castellano, your coffee, sir. He didn't stir. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the half-hour, its deep resonance flooding me with panic. I'd never been in this situation before. My instructions were clear: deliver breakfast at 7:30. But no one had told me what to do if Mr. Castellano was still asleep. I took a tentative step into the room, then another. The plush carpet silenced my footsteps as I approached the nightstand, intending to leave the tray and slip away unnoticed. But as I drew closer to the bed, something felt wrong. His breathing seemed too measured, too even. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. I'd grown up with 3 younger brothers. I knew what genuine sleep looked like. This wasn't it. Was Dominic Castellano pretending to be asleep? The thought was so absurd I almost laughed aloud. Why would one of the most powerful men in the criminal underworld feign sleep to trick a maid? It made no sense. I was being paranoid, reading too much into nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, evaluated. I set the tray down as quietly as possible and turned to leave. Where's Valentina? His voice, deep and rough with sleep, or the pretense of it, stopped me in my tracks. I turned slowly, keeping my eyes respectfully lowered to somewhere around his chest, which I immediately regretted when I was reminded of his state of undress. She's ill this morning, sir. Food poisoning, Mrs. Russo thinks. A lie. Valentina, the other maid assigned to the East Wing, had been fine when we'd shared breakfast in the staff quarters at 6. But Mr. Castellano didn't need to know that she was actually meeting her boyfriend in the garden shed instead of completing her morning duties. He studied me for a long moment, dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. You're Ellie, right? The new girl. Yes, sir. 6 months hardly qualified as new, but I didn't correct him. Elizabeth Hayes. He sat up, sheet pooling around his waist, and reached for the coffee. I should have been dismissed, should have backed away and returned to my duties. But something in his expression held me in place. He sipped the coffee, eyes never leaving mine. "Perfect," he murmured, though whether he meant the coffee or something else I couldn't tell. "You'll replace Valentina this morning." My heart sank. "Sir?" "I have guests arriving at noon. I need the blue guest suite prepared." He set down the cup with deliberate precision. "Valentina usually handles it, but since she's indisposed, the responsibility falls to you. The blue guest suite. Even among the staff, that room was spoken of in whispers. Located in the most secluded part of the East Wing, it was used exclusively for Mr. Castellano's most important visitors. No one but Valentina was ever allowed to prepare it, and none of us were permitted inside once guests arrived. I don't know the protocol for the blue suite, sir. Perhaps Mrs. Russo could— Mrs. Russo is busy with lunch preparations." His tone left no room for argument. "Valentina keeps detailed instructions in the linen closet beside the suite. Follow them to the letter." "Yes, sir." He smiled then, the expression transforming his face from intimidating to devastating. In that moment, I understood how Dominic Castellano had built an empire. That smile could make anyone, man or woman, want to please him, want to earn his approval. "Thank you, Ellie." The unexpected courtesy caught me off guard. Mr. Castellano wasn't known for thanking the staff. "You're welcome, sir." I backed toward the door, unwilling to turn my back on him, as if he were indeed the predator my instincts warned me about. Just as I reached the threshold, his voice stopped me again. "And Ellie, tell Valentina I hope she feels better soon. Food poisoning can be most unpleasant." There was something in his tone, a knowing edge, that sent a chill down my spine. He knew. Somehow he knew she was lying. "I'll tell her, sir." I fled down the hallway, heart hammering. Only when I reached the service stairs did I allow myself to breathe normally again. I needed to warn Valentina, but first, I had to check the blue suite's mysterious protocols. The linen closet beside the blue guest suite was immaculate, everything labeled and organized with military precision. A leather-bound notebook sat on the middle shelf. "Blue Suite Protocols," embossed in gold on its cover. I flipped it open, scanning the handwritten instructions. Fresh linens, specific thread count. Egyptian cotton towels warmed to precise temperatures. Crystal decanters filled with particular spirits. All expected for a luxury guest room. But as I read further, my blood ran cold. Hidden panels to be checked and secured. Recording equipment to be tested. Two-way mirrors to be cleaned with special solution that wouldn't damage the surveillance technology behind them. A list of items to be refreshed in the suite's safe. Syringes, zip ties, soundproofing materials. This wasn't a guest room. It was an interrogation chamber disguised as luxury accommodations. I closed the notebook with trembling hands, suddenly understanding why Valentina was one of the few staff with access to this room. She wasn't just a maid. She was complicit in whatever happened here. "There you are." I jumped at the sound of Valentina's voice, nearly dropping the notebook. She stood in the doorway, cheeks flushed from her rendezvous, dark hair slightly mussed despite her attempts to smooth it. "Jesus, Val, you scared me." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "I thought you were meeting Marco." She waved a dismissive hand. "He had to start his shift early. What are you doing here? This isn't your section." I held up the notebook. "Castellano asked me to prepare the blue suite, since you're supposedly sick with food poisoning." Her olive complexion paled. "He knows I wasn't sick?" He strongly implied it. "Said to tell you he hopes you feel better soon," in a way that made it clear he knows you're lying. I handed her the notebook. "What is all this, Val? What kind of guests need surveillance and restraints?" Valentina grabbed my arm, pulling me deeper into the linen closet and shutting the door behind us. The small space felt immediately claustrophobic, filled with the scent of lavender and fear. "Listen to me carefully, Ellie." Her Italian accent thickened with urgency. "What Mr. Castellano does in this house is not our business. We clean, we serve, we keep our heads down and our mouths shut. That's how we stay alive. But, no buts." Her fingers dug into my arm. "Do you know what happened to the maid before you? Maria? She asked too many questions, saw too much. One day she was here, the next, poof, gone without a trace. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. Are you saying he killed her? Valentina released my arm, rubbing her forehead wearily. I'm saying we're replaceable, Ellie. All of us. Mr. Castellano pays well and doesn't bother us if we follow his rules. That's the deal. And if the rules include helping him torture people? She flinched at my bluntness. Today's guest is Mikhail Petrov. Russian. Very dangerous man, but he's been skimming from Mr. Castellano's drug shipments for months. How do you know all this? A bitter smile twisted her lips. Because I listen. Because unlike you, I don't pretend this is just a normal household with a normal employer. She leaned closer. And because Marco isn't just a groundskeeper. He's Mr. Castellano's cousin and one of his lieutenants. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these months I'd thought Valentina was just like me, an ordinary woman working a well-paying job, turning a blind eye to our employer's criminal activities as long as they remained abstract, distant from our daily lives. Is that why you applied to work here? Because of Marco? She nodded. We've been together 3 years. Mr. Castellano doesn't approve of Marco dating staff, so we keep it secret. She clutched my hands. Please, Ellie. You can't tell anyone what you've seen. Not just for my sake, but for yours too. The desperation in her eyes frightened me more than anything I'd read in the notebook. I won't say anything, I promised, the words ashen on my tongue. But I can't prepare that room, Val. I can't be part of whatever happens there. She exhaled with relief. I'll do it. I'll tell Mrs. Russo I'm feeling better. She hesitated, then added, You should request a transfer to the West Wing. It's safer there, further from Mr. Castellano's business. Maybe I should just quit. Valentina's laugh held no humor. No one just quits working for Dominic Castellano. The things you've seen, the things you know, you think he'd let you walk away with that knowledge? She squeezed my hands. Request the transfer. Keep your head down. Forget about the blue suite. With that, she took the notebook and slipped out of the closet, leaving me alone with the weight of everything I'd discovered. I leaned against the shelves, trying to steady my breathing. How had I been so naive? Signs of Castellano's true nature were everywhere. The armed guards, the mysterious meetings, the sections of the mansion that were strictly off-limits. I'd chosen to ignore them, telling myself I was just a maid, that his business didn't concern me. That comfortable illusion had shattered. Now I was complicit too, trapped in a gilded cage with a predator who pretended to sleep while watching his prey, testing their loyalty, waiting for them to make a fatal mistake. I needed to get out, but Valentina was right. People like Dominic Castellano didn't simply let employees resign, especially ones who knew too much. I needed a plan, needed time. As I finally left the linen closet, I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the empty hallway, and froze when my eyes caught a tiny red light blinking from a decorative wall sconce. Cameras. Of course there were cameras. Had they captured my conversation with Valentina? Had Castellano been watching us the entire time? I forced myself to continue walking, maintaining an appearance of normalcy while my mind raced with implications. If he had heard us, what would happen? Would we both disappear like Maria? My only hope was to pretend I knew nothing, to play the role of the obedient, unquestioning maid. And meanwhile, I would plan my escape from the mansion and from Dominic Castellano. I spent the rest of the morning in a fog of anxiety, mechanically completing my assigned tasks while jumping at every shadow. The West Wing suddenly seemed like a distant paradise, though it was merely a corridor and 2 staircases away. Mrs. Russo had frowned when I requested the transfer, her penciled eyebrows drawing together in suspicion. The East Wing is short-staffed as it is, she'd said, making a note in her leather-bound planner. Mr. Castellano specifically requested you this morning. He must see something in your work. The thought made my skin crawl. I didn't want Dominic Castellano to notice anything about me. Invisibility was safety. I'll consider it, she'd finally conceded. But for now, continue your regular duties. So I dusted, polished, and vacuumed, all while feeling like a mouse scurrying under the watchful eyes of a hawk. By lunchtime, my nerves were frayed to breaking point. I retreated to the staff dining room, hoping for a moment's respite. Valentina was already there, picking at a salad, her usual animation replaced by tense silence. She barely acknowledged me when I sat across from her with my sandwich. "Is everything okay?" I whispered. Though we appeared to be alone, she glanced up, her dark eyes hollow with fear. "He wants to see us both, after lunch, in his study." The sandwich turned to sawdust in my mouth. "Why?" He didn't say. Neither of us spoke further, the weight of dread making conversation impossible. I forced myself to eat, knowing I'd need strength for whatever was coming. But each bite threatened to choke me. At precisely 1 o'clock, we stood outside Castellano's study, 2 lambs awaiting slaughter. Valentina knocked, her knuckles white against the dark wood. "Enter," came his voice, smooth and commanding. The study was a testament to old-world power. Mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a massive desk that dominated the space, and behind it, Dominic Castellano. Gone was the vulnerable man I'd glimpsed in bed that morning. This version wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor, hair perfectly styled, expression unreadable. "Valentina." He nodded to her, then shifted his gaze to me. "Elizabeth." The use of my full name startled me. I couldn't recall ever telling him anything but Ellie. "I trust you're feeling better," he addressed Valentina, one dark eyebrow raised in subtle mockery. She paled but maintained her composure. "Yes, sir. Much better." "Good." He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I've been reviewing the household security footage from this morning." My heart plummeted. So he had seen our conversation in the linen closet. "Interesting viewing," he continued. "I'm particularly fascinated by conversations about staff members who allegedly disappeared." His gaze cut to Valentina. "Maria, was it?" Valentina trembled beside me, her breathing shallow. "Sir, He raised a hand, silencing her instantly. "Maria Rodriguez requested a transfer to my Miami property last spring. She currently manages the household staff there, a significant promotion from her position here." His eyes narrowed. "She didn't disappear. She was rewarded for her loyalty and discretion." Heat rushed to my face. I stared at the intricate pattern of the Persian rug beneath my feet, mortified and terrified in equal measure. Which brings me to my current dilemma. Castellano stood, his height imposing even from behind the desk. "I have 2 employees discussing sensitive matters in whispers, spreading rumors. And worst of all..." He walked around the desk, moving with predatory grace, planning to leave my employment without proper notice. He stopped directly in front of us, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Sandalwood, and something darker, more primal. "Sir?" Valentina began, her voice quavering. "We weren't..." "Don't lie to me." The softness of his tone made it more frightening than a shout. "I'm not a patient man, but I am a fair one. I pay exceptionally well. I provide comfortable quarters, quality meals, generous time off. In return, I expect 2 things: excellence and loyalty." He turned to me then, dark eyes boring into mine. "Elizabeth seems to have concerns about certain aspects of my business. Concerns that have her questioning her continued employment here." I swallowed hard, finding my voice from some reserve of courage I didn't know I possessed. "I apologize for any disrespect, Mr. Castellano. I was startled by what I saw this morning." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his features before the mask of control returned. Honesty, refreshing. He returned to his chair, gesturing for us to sit in the 2 leather seats opposite his desk. We obeyed instantly. "Let me be clear," he said, once we were seated. "What happens in this house, particularly in the Blue Suite, is not the concern of my household staff. Your job is to maintain the appearance of a normal, if luxurious, private residence. Nothing more, nothing less." He fixed his gaze on me. "However, Elizabeth, since you've expressed such curiosity, perhaps a change in your role would be appropriate." My mouth went dry. "Sir." Valentina has served as both maid and assistant during certain business meetings. With my operation expanding, I find I need another trusted person in that capacity. He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "You've shown yourself to be observant, discreet in your duties if not in your private conversations, and clearly intelligent. I I don't understand. I'm offering you a promotion, higher pay, more responsibility, and most importantly, a more complete understanding of what happens in this house. No more rumors, no more speculation. You'll know exactly what you're a part of. The implication was clear, deeper complicity in exchange for security. And if I decline? I asked, my voice barely audible. Castellano's smile widened fractionally. Then you remain in your current position. Continue your excellent work as a maid, and forget everything you think you know about the Blue Suite, though I suspect your curiosity would make that difficult. It wasn't a threat, not explicitly, but the subtext was unmistakable. Knowledge was dangerous, but deliberate ignorance after glimpsing the truth might be even more so. I accept, I said, the words spilling out before I could reconsider. Valentina made a small noise beside me, something between a gasp and a whimper. Castellano ignored her, his focus entirely on me. Excellent. You'll begin tomorrow. Report to my office at 8 instead of your usual duties. He turned his attention to Valentina. As for you, your indiscretion with Marco ends now. She flinched as if struck. Marco and I have been conducting an affair against house rules for 3 years. Yes, I'm aware. His tone remained conversational, but his eyes had hardened to obsidian. Marco's familial connection affords him certain privileges, but they don't extend to undermining my authority by encouraging staff to lie about their whereabouts. Tears welled in Valentina's eyes. Please, sir. We love each other. Castellano's expression remained impassive. Love is a luxury in our world, Valentina. One that must be earned through unwavering loyalty, he sighed, almost regretful. You'll be transferred to my property in California, effective immediately. No. The word burst from her with raw anguish. Please, I'll end things with Marco. The decision is made. Castellano pressed a button on his desk phone. Mrs. Russo will help you pack. A car will take you to the airport in 2 hours. The door opened behind us, and Mrs. Russo entered, her face a mask of professional detachment. Come along, Valentina, she said gently. I watched, paralyzed with shock and guilt, as Valentina was led away, her tear-streaked face turning back to me with an expression of betrayal that would haunt my dreams for months to come. When the door closed, leaving me alone with Castellano, the silence stretched between us like a living thing. You're wondering if you've made a terrible mistake, he said finally, accurately reading my expression. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Understandable. He stood and moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a crystal decanter. Drink? No, thank you. He poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid, swirled it thoughtfully. Valentina will be fine. California is hardly a punishment. In fact, many would consider it a reward. He took a sip. But she needed to understand that actions have consequences. And Marco? A shadow crossed his face. Family is complicated. Marco will be reassigned to security rather than groundskeeping. His talents are wasted trimming hedges anyway. I gathered my courage. Did you really pretend to be asleep this morning? To test us? The question clearly surprised him. He laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. Direct, aren't you? Yes. I sometimes test my staff. People reveal their true nature when they believe no one is watching. And what did I reveal? Castellano studied me over the rim of his glass. Perception. Intuition. You sensed I was awake when most wouldn't have noticed. You lied to protect Valentina initially, showing loyalty. Yet when confronted with troubling information, you questioned it rather than blindly accepting. He set down his glass. Those are valuable qualities, Elizabeth. I prefer Ellie, I said, surprising myself with the assertion. He tilted his head slightly, assessing me. Ellie, then. Though Elizabeth suits you better, it has gravitas. The familiar way he spoke my name sent an unwelcome shiver down my spine. Not entirely from fear. What exactly will my new role entail? I asked, desperate to redirect the conversation. You'll maintain the appearance of a maid to outsiders, but you'll also attend certain meetings, record conversations, and occasionally assist with special guests. Like Mikhail Petrov, The name slipped out before I could stop myself. Castellano's expression darkened. Valentina has a loose tongue. Yes, like Petrov. He moved around the desk again, leaning against it directly in front of me, invading my space. He's been stealing from me for months. Today he'll confess and return what he's taken, and if he doesn't? The smile that curved his lips held no warmth. He will. I should have been repulsed, should have been planning my escape, finding a way out of this mansion and the web Castellano was weaving around me. Instead, I found myself morbidly curious about him, about his world, about the power he wielded so effortlessly. Why me? I asked. There are dozens of staff members. Why choose me for this promotion? He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. I froze, caught between the urge to recoil and a treacherous desire to lean into his touch. Because you see me, Ellie, not just Dominic Castellano, the boss, the figurehead. You see beneath the surface. His hand dropped away. That's rare and dangerous. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed twice, breaking the strange tension between us. Castellano straightened. Petrov will be arriving soon. I need to prepare. He returned to his seat, dismissing me with a nod. Get some rest this afternoon. Tomorrow will be educational. I rose on unsteady legs, moving toward the door with as much dignity as I could muster. As my hand touched the knob, his voice stopped me one last time. Elizabeth. I turned, finding his dark gaze fixed on me with unsettling intensity. Remember that everything in this house happens for a reason, including your presence here. The words followed me like a shadow as I fled to my room, locking the door behind me, as if it could keep out the implications of what had just transpired. I sank onto my bed, mind racing. In the space of a single day, I'd gone from anonymous maid to... what? Accomplice? Confidant? Target? I moved to the window, staring out at the manicured grounds that suddenly felt like the perimeter of a beautiful prison. Guards patrolled the gates, their weapons visible even from this distance. In the garden below, I spotted Marco, his handsome face twisted with grief, as a senior security officer spoke to him, likely delivering the news about Valentina. My chest ached with guilt. She'd been sent away while I'd been promoted, all because I'd shown qualities that Dominic Castellano found useful. What did that say about me? A black SUV with tinted windows rolled up the circular driveway, flanked by two identical vehicles. From the center car emerged a heavy-set man with silver hair, his expensive suit failing to disguise the hardness in his bearing. Mikhail Petrov, I presumed. Castellano appeared on the front steps to greet him, all smiles and open arms. The perfect host welcoming an honored guest. No one watching would guess that the blue suite had been prepared for an interrogation rather than rest. I pulled the curtains closed, unable to watch the charade. Tomorrow, I would begin my new role in Castellano's empire. Tonight, I needed to decide who I wanted to be in this dangerous new reality. Victim, survivor, or something more complicated than either. Because one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. Dominic Castellano had plans for me that went far beyond household duties, and I was already too entangled to simply walk away. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned in my small but comfortable staff bedroom, replaying the day's events on an endless loop. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Valentina's face, streaked with tears as Mrs. Russo led her away. I saw Marco in the garden, shoulders slumped in defeat, and most disturbingly, I saw Dominic Castellano's dark, penetrating gaze as he brushed the hair from my face, his touch lingering a moment too long. By the time dawn broke, I'd made no concrete plans beyond simple survival. Observe, learn, and find a way out that wouldn't end with me disappearing or being transferred to another property in Castellano's vast empire. At least, not without my consent. I dressed with extra care, eschewing my usual maid's uniform for the only professional outfit I owned. A charcoal pencil skirt, cream blouse, and sensible black heels I'd brought for job interviews before landing the position at the mansion. The reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, part secretary, part woman playing dress-up in clothes she didn't quite belong in. At precisely 8 o'clock, I knocked on Castellano's office door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Enter. He sat behind his massive desk, papers spread before him. reading glasses perched low on his nose, an oddly humanizing detail that caught me off guard. He glanced up, eyes flickering over my appearance with an approving nod, before removing his glasses. "Good morning, Elizabeth." "Good morning, Mr. Castellano." I remained standing just inside the door, uncertain of my place in this new dynamic. "Coffee?" He gestured to an elegant silver service on a side table. "Help yourself. And pour me a cup as well, Black." I complied, grateful for the familiar task amidst so much uncertainty. The routine of preparing coffee steadied my hands, gave me a moment to compose myself. "Your conversation with Mr. Petrov yesterday," I began, setting his cup before him. "Was it productive?" Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Very. He's currently recovering in the Blue Suite. You'll bring him lunch later today." The casual way he referred to recovering, as if Petrov were convalescing from illness rather than whatever had transpired in that room, sent a chill through me. "He's still here?" I couldn't mask my surprise. Castellano sipped his coffee. Mikhail and I reached an understanding, but certain details remained to be finalized. "He'll be our guest for another day or two." I took the seat across from him when he motioned for me to sit, perching on the edge as if ready to flee. "You have questions," he stated, setting down his cup. "Ask them." The invitation, or was it a command, hung between us. I hesitated, weighing the dangers of curiosity against the risks of remaining ignorant. What exactly happened to Valentina? His eyebrow arched, clearly not the question he'd expected. "She's on a plane to San Francisco. As I said, my estate there is quite beautiful. Overlooking the bay, staff quarters with a view most people would pay thousands for monthly. Hardly exile. But away from Marco, away from everything she knows. Actions have consequences, Elizabeth." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him like heat. "Valentina compromised security protocols, lied about her whereabouts while on duty, and spread malicious rumors about my treatment of staff. In most organizations, that would result in termination. In mine, it means reassignment." I nodded slowly, processing his words. There was a cold logic to his punishment, a twisted fairness I hadn't expected. "And what happens if I fail to meet your expectations in my new role?" The question hung between us, more revealing than I'd intended. Castellano studied me for a long moment, his expression softening fractionally. "You won't." The simple confidence in his words was more unsettling than any threat could have been. "But if I did," I pressed. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You fear ending up like Valentina. Or worse, like the Maria of Valentina's imagination." He shook his head. "I don't discard valuable assets, Elizabeth. I cultivate them. If this particular role doesn't suit you, we'll find another that does." "You make it sound like I have a choice." "Everyone has choices." His voice hardened. "Some are simply more limited than others." Before I could respond, the intercom on his desk buzzed. He pressed a button. "Yes?" "Mr. Romano has arrived for your 9 o'clock, came Mrs. Russo's crisp voice. "Send him in, and have Mrs. Hayes's credentials prepared." He released the button, turning back to me. "Anthony Romano is my attorney. He handles both my legitimate businesses and other matters. You'll be taking notes during our meeting." My surprise must have shown on my face because he added, "Your employment file mentions a background in administrative work before joining my staff. 2 years as a legal assistant, if I recall correctly." The fact that he knew this detail, one I'd almost forgotten myself, was disconcerting. How closely had he been watching me? Yes, that's right. For a small firm in Connecticut. Then this should feel familiar. He opened a drawer, withdrawing a slim laptop. "Everything discussed stays in this room. You'll type notes on this computer, which remains here. The document is automatically encrypted." A knock at the door interrupted us. Castellano called for the visitor to enter, and a distinguished man in his 60s stepped in, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. His keen blue eyes assessed me immediately. "Dominic," he greeted warmly, before turning to me with polite curiosity. "And who might this be?" "Anthony. Meet Elizabeth Hayes, my new assistant." Castellano's emphasis on the last word carried weighted meaning. Elizabeth. Anthony Romano, who keeps me on the right side of the law, usually. Romano's handshake was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Pleasure, Ms. Hayes. I wasn't aware Dominic was looking for an assistant. A recent development, Castellano replied smoothly. Elizabeth has shown exceptional awareness that suits her for more responsibility. The attorney's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. Well, shall we begin? We have several matters to discuss. For the next hour, I typed as the men discussed property acquisitions, investment opportunities, and charitable donations, all seemingly legitimate business affairs. Just as I was beginning to wonder if I'd misunderstood Castellano's criminal empire, the conversation shifted. About the situation in Jersey City, Romano said, his tone deliberately casual. Our friends there are becoming impatient with the current arrangement. Castellano's expression darkened. The Moretti family agreed to our terms. 6 months exclusive distribution rights in exchange for our support during their difficulties with the Russians. They're claiming the arrangement has become untenable. Losses exceeding projections by 30%. Bullshit. The crude word sounded strange in Castellano's cultured voice. They're skimming and blaming market conditions, just like Petrov. Romano sighed, removing his glasses to polish them with a silk handkerchief. I advised against the partnership from the beginning. The Morettis have always been unreliable. Have Salvatore review their books. If they're lying, we'll need to renegotiate from a position of strength. Castellano glanced at me. Make a note for Sal. Full audit of Moretti operations. Priority. I dutifully typed the instruction, maintaining a neutral expression, despite the clear implication of criminal activity. This was the world I'd glimpsed from afar, now coming into sharp focus. Drug distribution territories, rival families, the machinery of organized crime operating beneath a veneer of legitimacy. The meeting continued, shifting between legal business and criminal operations with unsettling fluidity. Throughout it all, I typed, observed, and tried to reconcile the sophisticated businessman before me with the implied violence of his other dealings. When Romano finally departed, I saved the document as instructed and closed the laptop. You did well, Castellano said, studying me with that penetrating gaze. Most people show more discomfort during their first exposure to the less public aspects of my business. I'm very good at hiding my discomfort, I replied honestly. That earned me a genuine laugh, the sound warming his features in a way that was dangerously appealing. Honest, at least. He checked his watch. It's nearly noon. Time for you to meet our guest. My stomach tightened with dread. Mr. Petrov. Indeed. Castellano rose, straightening his already immaculate suit. Mrs. Russo has prepared a meal for him. You'll deliver it and assess his condition. I'm not medically trained, I protested weakly. A fact I'm well aware of. He moved toward the door, clearly expecting me to follow. You're observing, Elizabeth. Your impressions are valuable precisely because they're unfiltered by experience in my world. The blue suite was located at the far end of the east wing, its double doors guarded by 2 men whose bulky jackets poorly concealed their weapons. They nodded respectfully to Castellano, one opening the door for us without comment. The outer sitting room was exactly as one would expect in a luxury guest suite. Elegant furnishings, tasteful artwork, fresh flowers in crystal vases. Nothing to suggest its true purpose. Castellano gestured for me to wait as he proceeded to the bedroom door, knocking once before entering. Muffled conversation drifted out. Castellano's measured tones contrasted with another man's hoarser voice, tinged with an accent I couldn't quite place. After several minutes, Castellano emerged, expression unreadable. He's presentable. Bring in the lunch tray and observe while he eats. Make conversation if he initiates it, but volunteer nothing about yourself or this household. I retrieved the tray from Mrs. Russo, who waited discreetly in the hallway, her face revealing nothing as she handed it over. The weight of silver domes and fine china seemed to increase with each step toward the bedroom. The man propped up in the 4-poster bed barely resembled the confident figure I'd glimpsed from my window the day before. Mikhail Petrov's silver hair was disheveled, his face ashen and drawn. His right hand was heavily bandaged, and a spectacular bruise bloomed across his left cheekbone. Your lunch, Mr. Petrov, I said, my voice steadier than I expected as I placed the tray across his lap. His bloodshot eyes studied me with weary suspicion. "Another one of Dominic's pretty birds," he muttered, his accent thicker than I'd anticipated. "Come to sing for the broken man, yes?" I ignored the comment, arranging the silverware with mechanical precision. "Can I get you anything else, sir? Water? Pain medication?" Petrov laughed, the sound ending in a wince as it apparently aggravated some unseen injury. "Medication, yes, the strongest you have. Enough to stop the pain permanently, perhaps." The gallows humor made my skin crawl. "I'll have to consult with Mr. Castellano regarding medication." "Of course you will." He lifted the silver dome with his uninjured hand, revealing a perfectly prepared filet mignon, roasted vegetables, and potato puree. "He feeds his prisoners well, I'll give him that." I remained silent, standing at a respectful distance while he picked at the meal with his left hand, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar coordination. "You're new," he said after several awkward minutes. "The others, they don't look me in the eye. But you're still curious, still thinking you're separate from all this." He gestured vaguely at his injuries with his bandaged hand. "I'm just here to ensure you have what you need, Mr. Petrov," he snorted. "What I need is a time machine to go back and never cross Dominic Castellano." He set down his fork. "You know what he did to me? To secure my cooperation?" I shook my head, though dread pooled in my stomach. "He didn't touch me himself. Too refined for that, our Dominic." Petrov's voice turned bitter. "His men worked on me for hours. Very professional, no permanent damage, just enough pain to make my resolve crumble like dust." He held up his bandaged hand. "Then Dominic enters, all apologies about the unpleasantness. Says we can end this easily. Takes out a beautiful antique letter opener from his pocket." My throat constricted as I anticipated what was coming. "One finger," Petrov continued, eyes haunted. "That was the price of my betrayal, 1 finger and the return of his merchandise. A bargain, he called it." He laughed again, that same hollow sound. "And do you know what I felt when he left? Gratitude. Fucking gratitude that he'd only taken a finger." I stood frozen, unable to respond, unable to process the casual brutality of what he described. "That's his true power," Petrov said, pushing away the barely touched food. "Not the pain he inflicts, but how he makes you thank him for not doing worse." His gaze locked with mine. "Remember that, pretty bird, when he turns those dark eyes on you. When he makes you feel special, chosen. It's just another form of control." The door opened behind me, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Castellano entered, his timing so perfect I wondered if he'd been listening. "Enjoying your lunch, Mikhail?" he asked pleasantly, as if inquiring of an honored guest rather than a mutilated prisoner. Petrov's demeanor changed instantly, fear replacing bitterness. "Yes. Thank you, Dominic. Very generous." "Excellent. I trust Ms. Hayes has been attentive to your needs?" "Very professional," Petrov mumbled, eyes downcast. "Elizabeth, please take the tray and give us a moment." Castellano's tone was light, but the command was unmistakable. I gathered the dishes with trembling hands, avoiding both men's gazes as I backed toward the door. "Oh, and Elizabeth?" Castellano called as I reached the threshold. I paused, dreading what might come next. "Have Mrs. Russo prepare a car for Mr. Petrov. He'll be leaving us this afternoon." Relief flooded Petrov's face, so naked and profound that it made my chest ache. Castellano's mercurial shifts between cruelty and mercy were perhaps more terrifying than consistent brutality would have been. "Yes, sir," I managed, before fleeing with the tray. I delivered Castellano's instructions to Mrs. Russo in the kitchen, then escaped to a small staff bathroom where I promptly vomited, my body rejecting the horror of what I'd witnessed and heard, the clinical violence, the psychological manipulation. The way both men had looked at me, Petrov with pity, Castellano with expectation. When I'd composed myself, splashing cold water on my face and rinsing my mouth, I stared at my reflection in the small mirror. Who was this woman with haunted eyes looking back at me? How had I gone from dusting antiques to facilitating torture in the space of 24 hours? Petrov's warning echoed in my mind. When he makes you feel special, chosen, It's just another form of control. And yet, wasn't there truth in what Castellano had said as well? Everyone has choices. Some are simply more limited than others. My choice now was clear. Play along, gain his trust, and find a way out that wouldn't end with me broken like Petrov or exiled like Valentina. Because one thing was certain, I couldn't remain in Dominic Castellano's world and keep my soul intact. I straightened my blouse, smoothed my hair, and prepared to return to the lion's den, my mind already formulating a plan that felt both impossible and absolutely necessary. I would escape this gilded cage, no matter what it took. 3 weeks passed in a blur of disturbing revelations and moral compromises. Each day, I sank deeper into Castellano's world, learning its rhythms and rules, storing away information that might eventually secure my freedom. I recorded meetings, transcribed conversations, and maintained the facade of the perfect assistant, efficient, discreet, and apparently untroubled by the criminal enterprise unfolding around me. Castellano grew to rely on my presence. What had begun as note-taking expanded into managing his schedule, screening calls, and occasionally accompanying him to restaurants or legitimate business functions. To the outside world, I was simply his capable assistant. Within the mansion, everyone from Mrs. Russo to the security team now deferred to me as Castellano's trusted proxy. The power was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. "You've exceeded my expectations," Castellano remarked one evening as we worked late in his study, reviewing property acquisitions for a new restaurant. A legitimate business used to launder less legitimate income. Most people in your position would have broken by now. I looked up from the spreadsheets, maintaining my carefully constructed mask of professional detachment. "I'm adaptable." "Indeed." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that penetrating gaze that still made my heart race, though whether from fear or something else I couldn't always tell. But adaptation isn't the same as acceptance. I set down my pen. "Is acceptance what you want from me, Mr. Castellano?" He smiled slightly. "After 3 weeks, I think you've earned the right to call me Dominic, at least in private." The implied intimacy of the permission wasn't lost on me. It represented a shift in our dynamic. Another step toward the invisible line separating professional distance from dangerous closeness. "Is acceptance what you want from me, Dominic?" I repeated, testing the weight of his name on my tongue. He rose and moved to the sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of wine without asking if I wanted one. "What I want," he said, handing me a glass of deep burgundy liquid, "is for you to stop planning your escape." The wine sloshed as my hand trembled. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't insult my intelligence, Elizabeth." His tone remained conversational, but his eyes hardened. The careful questions about my schedule, the interest in security protocols, the way you've befriended my drivers, learning the rotation of shifts. He took a measured sip of wine. "Gathering intelligence is the first step in any strategic exit." Fear coursed through me, cold and paralyzing. I'd been so careful, so subtle in my information gathering. Yet he'd seen through me as if my thoughts were written on my skin. "Are you going to stop me?" I asked quietly. To my surprise, he laughed. "If I wanted to stop you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You'd be joining Valentina in California, or perhaps my property in Montana. Much more remote, fewer opportunities to slip away unnoticed." I set down the untouched wine, my mouth dry with dread. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to make an informed decision." He moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk mere inches from where I sat. "You've seen the ugly parts of my world, Elizabeth. The violence, the retribution, the necessary evils of maintaining power. I thought of Petrov's bandaged hand, of whispered conversations about rivals who had disappeared, of ledgers tracking drug shipments and protection payments. "Yes," I whispered. "I've seen enough." "But you haven't seen everything." His voice softened. "The 300 jobs created by my legitimate businesses. The addiction recovery center I fund anonymously on the East Side. The families of fallen associates whose children's education I ensure is paid through college." I frowned, thrown off balance by this unexpected perspective. "You're saying the good outweighs the bad?" "I'm saying there's balance in all things." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. including me. I should have pulled away from his touch. Instead, I found myself leaning into it, starved for gentle human contact after weeks of fear and isolation. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Breathless, vulnerable. His thumb brushed my cheekbone with surprising tenderness. "Because I don't want you to leave, Elizabeth. And I'd rather convince you to stay willingly than force the issue." The admission hung between us, raw and honest in a way little else in this house had been. I searched his dark eyes, looking for manipulation or deceit, but found only intensity and something that looked disturbingly like genuine desire. "I need time," I managed, pulling back from his touch before I could forget all the reasons to fear this man. "To think." He nodded, returning to his chair with fluid grace, as if our moment of intimacy had never happened. "Take the weekend. Monday morning we'll discuss your decision." The abrupt shift back to business was disorienting. "And if I still want to leave, then I'll require 2 weeks' notice, during which you'll train your replacement." His smile held no warmth, and signed several extremely comprehensive non-disclosure agreements, of course. The casual mention of a replacement sent an unexpected pang through me. Jealousy? Surely not. I should be relieved at the prospect of escape, not territorial over a position I'd never wanted. "Of course," I echoed, gathering my papers with hands that only slightly trembled. "Will that be all for tonight?" He nodded, already turning his attention back to the documents before him. "Good night, Elizabeth." "Good night, Dominic." I retreated to my room, mind spinning with the implications of our conversation. He'd known about my escape plans all along, yet had allowed me to continue. Why? As a test? A game? Or was his stated desire for me to stay voluntarily genuine? More troubling was my own reaction to his touch, to the intimacy he'd offered so unexpectedly. Stockholm Syndrome, I told myself firmly, a psychological response to prolonged captivity and stress. Nothing more. Yet as I lay in bed that night, it wasn't fear that kept me awake, but the memory of his fingers against my skin and the unwelcome warmth they had ignited. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful autumn day that seemed at odds with my turmoil. I dressed in jeans and a sweater, civilian clothes that reminded me I was a person outside of this mansion and its master. Mrs. Russo raised an eyebrow when I appeared in the kitchen, my casual attire marking me as off-duty. "Mr. Castellano mentioned you'd be taking personal time this weekend," she said, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. "Any plans?" The question seemed innocent, but in this house, nothing was without layers. "Just catching up on reading, maybe a walk in the gardens." She nodded, apparently satisfied with my mundane intentions. "The roses are particularly lovely this time of year, near the south gate, especially." I froze with the cup halfway to my lips. The south gate was the least guarded entrance to the property, a fact I'd noted during my careful reconnaissance. Was Mrs. Russo suggesting? Before I could decipher her meaning, Marco entered the kitchen, his handsome face drawn with tension. Since Valentina's departure, he'd been a ghost of his former self, performing his security duties with mechanical precision. "Mrs. Hayes," he acknowledged me with a curt nod. "Marco." I hesitated, then added, "How are you holding up?" His jaw tightened. "Fine. Thank you for asking." The formal response was belied by the raw pain in his eyes. Mrs. Russo busied herself at the stove, giving us a semblance of privacy. I lowered my voice. "Have you heard from her? From Valentina?" "Once," he admitted quietly. "A phone call, 2 weeks ago. She's adjusting." The word seemed to cost him physically. "She says the California estate is beautiful." Golden Gate visible from her window, just as Castellano had claimed. A gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. "I'm sorry," I offered inadequately. For my part in what happened, Marco's expression softened slightly. "It wasn't your fault. We knew the risks." He glanced around, then leaned closer. "Be careful, Elizabeth. The boss has plans for you. I've seen how he watches you." A shiver ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "Just watch yourself." Dominic Castellano doesn't form attachments easily, but when he does... Marco shook his head. "It's intense." Before I could press for details, Another security team member called for Marco from the doorway. He excused himself, leaving me with more questions than answers, and the unsettling implication that Castellano's interest went beyond my usefulness as an assistant. I spent the morning wandering the extensive gardens, ostensibly enjoying the last warm days before winter, but actually contemplating my options. Castellano had offered what appeared to be a clean exit: 2 weeks' notice, paperwork, and freedom. It seemed too easy after everything I'd witnessed. And yet, what if it was genuine? What if I could simply walk away? As I approached the south gate, I noted the security camera aimed at the entrance was tilted slightly away. Maintenance issue or deliberate blind spot? The guard stationed at the small gatehouse was engrossed in his phone, barely glancing up as I strolled past. I could leave now. Walk through that gate, catch a taxi at the main road, and disappear before Castellano realized I was gone. The temptation was nearly overwhelming. Beautiful day for contemplating life-altering decisions, isn't it? I whirled around to find Dominic himself standing a few feet behind me, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that softened his usually imposing presence. Without his suits and the backdrop of his office, he looked almost normal, handsome in a way that made my pulse quicken despite everything I knew about him. "You're having me followed," I accused, embarrassment heating my cheeks at being caught so obviously eyeing my potential escape route. "Not at all. I often walk the grounds on weekends." He fell into step beside me, as if we were simply colleagues enjoying the gardens. The mansion can feel confining, even to someone who owns it. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. "Is that why you're really keeping me here? You're lonely?" The question was bolder than I'd intended, but his casual appearance and the open sky above us made me reckless. Dominic considered me for a long moment. Loneliness implies a lack of people. I'm surrounded by people. He gestured toward the mansion. Employees, associates, sycophants aplenty, but not equals, I guessed. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at my perception. "Few people in my position have equals, Elizabeth. It's the nature of power. It sounds isolating. It can be." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. But then someone comes along who sees past the power, past the wealth and influence, to the person beneath. His gaze held mine, intense and searching. Someone who isn't afraid to challenge them, to question their choices, to make them reconsider their path. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I think you're confusing Stockholm Syndrome with genuine connection." He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the autumn air, always direct. "It's refreshing." His expression grew serious. "You're free to leave, Elizabeth. The gate is right there. I won't stop you." I glanced toward the south gate, so tantalizingly close. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he confirmed. "Though I hope you'll stay and hear me out first." Curiosity, my greatest weakness in this place, got the better of me. "I'm listening." Dominic gestured toward a stone bench overlooking a small koi pond. We sat, a careful distance between us, the late morning sun warming the air around us. "I built my first company at 19, he began, surprising me with a personal revelation. A legitimate security firm, nothing to do with my family's less reputable businesses. I wanted something of my own, something clean. I watched his profile as he spoke. The strong jaw, the slight furrow between his brows as he recalled his past. It was successful beyond my expectations. By 25, I had contracts with major corporations, a growing staff, a future that could have taken me completely away from my family legacy. He paused, his expression darkening. Then my father was killed. Rival organization. The old rules of respect and territory meant nothing to them. "I'm sorry," I said reflexively, then wondered why I was offering sympathy to a man who had ordered torture. He acknowledged my words with a slight nod. With my father gone, our family business was vulnerable. My choices were simple: walk away and watch everything collapse, or step in. His hands clasped together, knuckles whitening. I chose to step in, to protect what was ours, to ensure those loyal to my father wouldn't suffer. It became the very thing you'd tried to escape, I observed quietly. His gaze met mine, surprise and something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. "Yes, but I brought my legitimate skills with me: organization, strategy, vision. I transformed an old-school criminal operation into a modern enterprise, minimized violence, expanded legitimate holdings. Yet you still cut off Petrov's finger, I challenged. Yes, he admitted without hesitation. Because in my world, betrayal must have consequences. Visible, memorable consequences that discourage others from similar choices. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I don't expect you to understand or approve. I'm simply offering context. Why? Why does it matter what I think of you? The question hung between us, more revealing than I'd intended. Dominic turned toward me, his knee nearly touching mine on the narrow bench. Because in 3 weeks, you've seen me more clearly than people who have known me for years. You don't flinch from the ugliness, but you don't dismiss the possibility of something better either. His voice lowered. You make me want to be the man I intended to become before fate intervened. The raw honesty in his voice stole my breath. This wasn't manipulation or seduction, or if it was masterfully done. This was a glimpse of the man beneath the Mafia boss, the road not taken. I don't know what to say to that, I admitted. Say you'll stay, he replied simply. Not as my employee, but as a partner. Someone who can help bridge my two worlds with her intelligence and perspective. Partner, I repeated carefully. In what sense? His lips curved in a smile that transformed his face, softening the hard edges of power into something dangerously appealing. In whatever sense develops naturally between us. No pressure, no expectations beyond mutual respect. It was tempting. More tempting than I wanted to admit. The attraction I'd been fighting since that first morning in his bedroom had only grown as I'd glimpsed the complexity beneath his controlled exterior, but the danger hadn't diminished. I need more time, I said finally, to think, to be sure. He nodded, accepting my hesitation without visible disappointment. Of course. He stood, offering his hand to help me up from the bench. Take all the time you need. I placed my fingers in his, allowing him to pull me to my feet. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through me that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the electricity that had been building between us. Thank you for your honesty, I said, withdrawing my hand before the touch could linger. Thank you for listening. He stepped back, giving me space. Whatever you decide on Monday, Elizabeth, know that I respect your choice. He walked away then, leaving me beside the koi pond with the south gate still visible in the distance, and the realization that my decision had just become infinitely more complicated. Because despite everything I knew about Dominic Castellano, despite the violence and manipulation I'd witnessed, I was no longer certain that leaving was what I truly wanted. Sunday passed in a fog of indecision. I alternated between packing my meager belongings and unpacking them again, drafting resignation letters I couldn't bring myself to finish, and standing at my window watching the comings and goings of Castellano's empire with new eyes. By evening, I was no closer to a decision. I avoided the common areas, having meals delivered to my room by a sympathetic kitchen staff member who asked no questions about my self-imposed isolation. If Dominic wondered about my absence, he didn't seek me out, true to his word about giving me space to think. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying every interaction with Dominic since that first morning when I'd caught him pretending to sleep. Had he been testing me even then? Identifying qualities he could use? Or had he genuinely seen something in me that resonated with the man he might have become under different circumstances? Around 3 a.m, I gave up on rest and slipped from my room, padding barefoot through the silent mansion to the library, a quiet refuge I'd discovered during my second week. The vast room with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable reading nooks had become my sanctuary when the weight of what I was witnessing became too much. I didn't bother with lights, the full moon streaming through tall windows providing enough illumination to navigate to my favorite armchair in the corner. I curled up, drawing my knees to my chest, and stared out at the silvered landscape beyond the glass. Couldn't sleep either. I nearly jumped out of my skin at the soft voice from the shadows. Dominic emerged from the darkness near one of the bookshelves, a leather-bound volume in his hands. Like me, he was dressed for sleep. Loose pajama pants and a simple t-shirt that made him look younger, more vulnerable than the powerful figure he presented to the world. I didn't realize anyone was here, I said, my voice slightly unsteady. I'm sorry to intrude. You're not intruding. He approached slowly as if afraid of startling me further. I often read here when sleep proves elusive. Something about the quiet and the books. It settles the mind. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. What are you reading? He held up the volume. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Problems. A self-deprecating smile crossed his lips. Though I doubt the emperor ever had to deal with Russian drug smugglers or rival crime families. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Probably not. Though politics in ancient Rome could be just as cutthroat from what I've read. True enough. He hesitated, then gestured to the chair opposite mine. May I? I nodded, and he settled into the matching armchair, close enough for conversation but maintaining a respectful distance. Have you made your decision? He asked after a moment of comfortable silence. No, I admitted. Every time I think I have, I change my mind again. He studied me in the moonlight, his expression thoughtful. What's the strongest argument for leaving? The directness of the question caught me off guard. You cut off a man's finger, I said bluntly. You ordered Valentina sent away from the man she loved as punishment for lying about her whereabouts. You run a criminal enterprise that profits from drugs, violence, and fear. He didn't flinch from the accusations. All true. And for staying? I hesitated, the answer more difficult to articulate. I think you want to be better, to find a path back to the man you intended to be before your father died. And perhaps I could help with that. Is that enough? He asked softly, to counterbalance the darkness you've seen. I don't know. I looked down at my hands, twisted in my lap. Logic says I should walk away. Self-preservation demands it. But? I met his gaze, moonlight casting shadows across features I'd grown to know intimately over the past weeks. But I've never felt more alive than I have here. More seen. More, I struggled for the right word, essential. He supplied. Yes. The simple truth of it resonated through me. And that terrifies me, because I don't know if it's real or just another form of manipulation. If I'm seeing the man, or the mask. Dominic set his book aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Ask me anything, Elizabeth, right now in this moment. No guards, no pretenses. Test whether what you're seeing is real. The invitation hung between us, weighted with possibility. I considered carefully, wanting a question that couldn't be deflected with practiced charm or calculated vulnerability. Do you regret it? I asked finally. Becoming this version of yourself instead of the legitimate businessman you wanted to be? Pain flickered across his features, so raw and genuine it couldn't be feigned. Every day, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I've built something powerful, protected my family's interests, secured a future for countless people who depend on me. But the cost? He shook his head. The cost has been my soul, piece by piece, decision by decision. The naked honesty in his voice made my chest ache. Then why continue? You have legitimate businesses now. Resources, connections. You could walk away. Could I? His smile held no humor. The moment I show weakness, everything collapses. Rivals move in, territory is lost, and the people under my protection suffer. It's a machine that requires constant maintenance, constant vigilance. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. But recently I've been considering alternatives. What kind of alternatives? A 5-year exit strategy, consolidation of legitimate holdings, strategic divestment from certain activities, strengthening alliances that could maintain stability during a transition. His eyes held mine. It would be complex, dangerous even, but possible, with the right partner. Someone with perspective, intelligence, and the moral compass I sometimes find compromised. The implication was clear, and it stole my breath. You're offering me a role in reshaping your entire empire. I'm offering you the chance to help me find redemption, if such a thing is possible for someone like me. He reached across the space between us, palm up in invitation. It would mean staying in this world for now, witnessing things that might trouble your conscience, making difficult compromises, but with a purpose beyond survival. or ambition. I stared at his outstretched hand, the decision crystallizing with unexpected clarity. If I stay, I said carefully, I need guarantees. No more fingers cut off, no more terrorizing people like Petrov. Business still requires consequences for betrayal, he countered, but perhaps less. Medieval methods could be employed. And Valentina returns, if she wishes to. His expression tightened. She violated security protocols. Because she was in love, I pressed. You separated them as punishment, not because either posed a genuine threat to your operation. Marco is miserable, and I suspect Valentina is too, regardless of her ocean view. He considered for a long moment, then nodded. I'll offer her the choice to return, with clear understanding of expectations going forward. And one more thing. I hesitated, then forced myself to continue. Whatever happens between us personally, whether this becomes a professional partnership or something more, I need to know I'm free to leave if it doesn't work out. No consequences, no threats. My choice, always. Agreed. His voice was solemn, the promise carrying the weight of an oath. Your freedom is non-negotiable, Elizabeth. I want you to stay because you choose to, not because you fear the alternative. His hand remained extended between us, patient and steady. After everything I'd witnessed, after all the moral compromises and fear, I should have turned away, should have stuck to my plan to escape. Instead, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, the connection sending a current of awareness through my entire body. For a breathless moment, we remained linked in the moonlight, the physical touch a symbol of a deeper commitment neither of us had anticipated 3 weeks ago. So, I said softly, where do we begin? With trust. He rubbed his thumb across my knuckles, the gentle motion at odds with the power I knew those hands possessed. And with this, he leaned forward slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I didn't, his lips met mine in a kiss that was surprisingly tender, a question rather than a demand. I answered by sliding my free hand to the nape of his neck, drawing him closer, deepening the contact. The spark that had been building between us ignited into flame, desire, and connection, intertwining until I couldn't distinguish one from the other. When we finally separated, both breathing unsteadily, I saw vulnerability in his eyes I'd never glimpsed before, hope, mingled with uncertainty. I want you to know, he said, his voice rougher than usual, that this, us, it isn't a condition of our arrangement. The professional partnership stands regardless. I know. And somehow, I did know. Whatever his flaws, whatever darkness lived inside him, manipulation in this moment wasn't part of it. I'm choosing this too, Dominic, eyes open. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture achingly familiar now. Then we begin at dawn, a new direction for both of us. 6 months later, I stood at the window of Dominic's, our private office, watching as Valentina crossed the garden path below, her hand intertwined with Marco's. She had returned from California 3 months ago, initially wary, but gradually softening as she witnessed the changes taking place throughout the organization. They look happy, Dominic observed, coming to stand behind me, his arms encircling my waist as he followed my gaze. They are, I confirmed, leaning back against his chest. Valentina told me they're talking about marriage. Good. His chin rested on my shoulder, a casual intimacy that still surprised me sometimes. They deserve happiness after everything. I turned in his arms, studying the face that had become beloved despite, or perhaps because of all its complexities. Speaking of happiness, Romano called, the paperwork for the Miami restaurant sale is complete. Dominic smiled, satisfaction evident in his expression. Another piece of our exit strategy falling into place, and the transition of the Jersey City territory? Peaceful, as we'd hoped. The Moretti family was amenable to our terms once they understood the long-term benefits. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture that had become his signature. Your suggestion to offer them legitimate investment opportunities as part of the agreement was inspired. I accepted the compliment with a nod, no longer uncomfortable with my role in reshaping his empire. The past 6 months had been a careful dance of dismantling criminal operations while strengthening legitimate ones, of maintaining power while preparing to redirect it entirely. Not all transitions had been bloodless. There had been resistance, threats, even an attempt on Dominic's life that still haunted my dreams. But we had weathered each challenge together, his strategic brilliance complemented by my moral compass and fresh perspective. And somewhere along the way, what had begun as attraction deepened into something neither of us had dared name until recently. "I have something for you," Dominic said, reaching into his pocket. "A token of everything." He withdrew a small velvet box, and my heart stuttered in my chest. "Dominic." "It's not what you think," he said quickly, though his smile suggested he wasn't opposed to that idea eventually. "Open it." Inside the box lay a simple silver key on a delicate chain. I lifted it, puzzled. "What does it open?" "A cottage in Vermont. 30 acres of privacy, a stream running through the property, mountains in the distance." His eyes held mine. "Serious now. Our sanctuary, when this is all finished. A place to begin again, away from the world we're leaving behind." Tears pricked my eyes as I understood the significance. It wasn't just a gift, it was a promise. A future beyond the mansion and its shadows, beyond the empire we were carefully dismantling. "It's perfect," I whispered, allowing him to fasten the chain around my neck. The key settled against my skin, its weight reassuring. "How much longer do you think? Until we're free?" 2 years, perhaps 3. He traced the line of the chain with gentle fingers. "The foundations are set. Romano has structured the legitimate holdings to operate independently. The transition plans for the remaining territories are in motion." I nodded. Having reviewed the documents myself, suggested refinements to minimize potential violence during the power shifts. "And when it's done? What then?" Dominic's smile held a boyish quality I'd grown to cherish. Glimpses of the man he might have been without his father's legacy. "Anything we want. Consulting, investments, perhaps that security firm I started at 19, reimagined for a new era. With a partner who keeps you on the right side of the law?" I teased, though we both knew my role was far more integral than moral guidance. "With a partner in every sense." His expression grew serious. "You took a chance on me, Elizabeth. On us, when you had every reason to walk away." I touched his face, tracing the strong jaw that no longer tensed with constant vigilance. "And you're becoming the man you were meant to be. The one who got derailed by circumstance and choice. Because of you," he said simply. "With me," I corrected. "The potential was always there." He captured my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent warmth spiraling through me. "Either way, I'm grateful. For the morning you caught me pretending to sleep. For your courage in staying. For everything since." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed noon, reminding us of the meeting scheduled with legitimate investors interested in expanding Dominic's restaurant chain across the East Coast. "Duty calls," I sighed, reluctant to break the moment. "For now." He kissed me once, briefly, but with a promise of more later. "But Vermont awaits when we're ready." As we prepared to meet the investors, I touched the key hanging around my neck, a tangible reminder of the future we were building, step by careful step. From captive to partner, from fear to love, my path with Dominic Castellano had been neither simple nor morally straightforward. But standing beside him now, watching him guide his empire toward legitimacy with the same strategic brilliance he'd once applied to criminal enterprises, I knew I'd made the right choice that moonlit night in the library. We were both finding redemption in the most unexpected of places. Each other. Later that evening, as we reviewed the day's successful negotiations, Dominic's phone buzzed with a message. He checked it, his expression shifting to one of quiet satisfaction. "Good news?" I asked. He handed me the phone, showing a message from his associate in Miami. "Final shipment complete. Clean transition confirmed. No incidents." Another piece of the criminal operation, dismantled without bloodshed. Another step toward the future symbolized by the key around my neck. "We're really doing this," I said, a mixture of wonder and relief in my voice. Dominic took back his phone, set it aside, and drew me into his arms. "We are. No more pretending to sleep while testing loyalties. No more blue suites with their hidden purposes. No more fear, I added, resting my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For either of us. Because that was the truth I'd come to understand. Dominic had been as trapped as I was, perhaps more so, caged by expectations, by the empire he'd inherited, by the role he'd assumed to protect what was his. Together, we'd found the key to both our prisons. And step by careful step, we were walking toward freedom, toward Vermont, toward a future neither of us had dared imagine until we found each other. "I love you," I said, the words still new enough to thrill me as they passed my lips. Despite everything, because of everything. His arms tightened around me, his voice rough with emotion. "And I love you, Elizabeth, more than I thought possible." Outside the mansion windows, darkness fell over the grounds that had once seemed like the boundaries of a gilded cage. Now they were simply the starting point of a journey. Complicated, challenging, but filled with the promise of redemption. For a man who had once pretended to sleep to test his maids, and a woman who had frozen upon hearing their whispered plans, we had found an unexpected truth. Sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most profound transformations. And as Dominic's lips found mine once more, I knew with absolute certainty that our transformation was just beginning.